Hello and welcome back to my channel. I hope everyone is having a good week. So after last week, that was a really long video. It took me a long time to edit and 3 tries to get it uploaded to YouTube. So it might be a little while before I do another one of those, even though I know a lot of y'all really liked that video and thought it was really fun. Today's going to be a little more boring, I guess, and a little shorter. I'm just going to talk about 4 different series that I think you should read, and I try to pick out series that I haven't talked about on my channel before. So these are 4 different series that I think really everyone should read. They are more geared towards children, but that doesn't mean that adults can't read them. I would still enjoy these books if I read them today, and a lot of them I have read more recently. The first one is one I don't think I've talked about at all on this channel, and it is quite a popular book series, but a bit controversial. So it is a series of unfortunate events by Lemony Snicket, and that is actually his pseudonym. His real name is Daniel Handler. You might have heard of this because Netflix made a series on it 2-3 years ago. I don't even know how many episodes there are now because I haven't watched it since season 2. I think I quit watching it because they made it too dark and too modern. But if you read these books, so the back of the book says, "Dear reader, I am sorry to say that the book you are holding in your hands is extremely unpleasant. It tells an unhappy tale about 3 very unlucky children. Even though they are charming and clever, the Baudelaire siblings lead lives filled with misery and woe. From the very first page of this book, when the children are at the beach and receive terrible news, continuing on through the entire story, disaster lurks at their heels. One might say they are magnets for misfortune. In this short book alone, the 3 youngsters encounter a greedy and repulsive villain, itchy clothing, a disastrous fire, a plot to steal their fortune, and cold porridge for breakfast. It is my sad duty to write down these unpleasant tales, but there is nothing stopping you from putting this book down at once and reading something happy, if you prefer that sort of thing. With all due respect, Lemony Snicket." So basically, I don't need to say anything about the book because that is a perfect description of it. Lemony Snicket, I guess, uses some reverse psychology to get you to read his books, because basically in every one of his books he says, "Don't read this book, it's a horrible book, you won't like it." And it is really depressing and sad, but in a way, whenever you read a book like that, it's different when you're watching a show. When I was watching the show, it was like, wow, I don't want to watch this is really sad. When you're reading the book, it's a little bit different. And there's a lot of humor put in here, and just the way he writes, there's a lot of allusions to classics and to history, and it's just one of those really pleasing books to read. I really enjoyed it. So there's 13 in this series, so this is the bad beginning, and it is the shortest of all the books, and then as the books progress, they get longer, and there's just more and more. It's basically these 3 orphans going to all these different guardians' houses, and it just turns out bad every single time. And in the end, it's almost like a allusion to hope, but it doesn't really end out well. So that's why a lot of people don't like it, because it's almost like nothing good can happen. But it is neat to see the siblings, they're working together, and one of the siblings is an inventor, and one of them is really smart, and one of them's a little baby who is really good at chewing things, and they work together and they solve these problems, and they're trying to figure out almost a mystery of their parents. So it is a really fun book about friendship and siblings, and it's just enjoyable to read. My mom read it out loud to us, I think, the first time I read it, and then I think I read the whole series on my own. So it's a fun read aloud, and there's lots of funny things that he adds on. I don't know what book it is. There's one book where he has just a page of evers. It just says never, ever, 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 ever. And that's very common for his books, to have random things like that. So they're really just fun books to read. The second series that I have is one that probably not very many people have heard of, and I don't think I've talked about it at all, but I love it. It is The Lost Property Office is the first one, and it's kind of almost like a steampunk type based in London book about this boy who figures out that his dad is some really important person in this society, and he kind of just stumbles upon this information when his dad is missing and he's looking for him. And then it has little powers that he has, so he can touch different substances like stone or metal, and he can see what those materials saw. So he can see basically like their memories or the impression that's left on them. And it's a really neat power that this author, James R. Hannibal, kind of just expounds on in his book. And it's actually really cool because it's based on synesthesia. It's a real life ability that people have to see sounds as color and just see things differently, kind of like their senses are blending over. And so it kind of shows you that in this book, and it's really neat. This first one talks about the Great Fire of London, and I think the other ones have some historical basis to it. But basically, they're like trying to figure out this mystery of the Great Fire of London, and he's looking back into history, kind of using his ability, using some history, and it's really neat. I like books like that that take an old historical thing that kind of has a bit of mystery to it and explore it and try to explain it. So I think this book is really neat, and I would recommend this for all ages, really. I really like The Lost Property Office and would recommend that you read all 3 of his books. The third series I would recommend is one I talked about in my last video, The Ranger's Apprentice, and you can probably see behind me, I have all 12 of them right here. And this is the first one, The Ruins of Gorlin. So this is kind of set in almost medieval times, and it is about a ranger. It's almost a story based off of Aragorn from The Lord of the Rings and what he does and how he's this ranger that travels around, and you can imagine he like protects the people. And so the author almost builds off of that. I don't know if it was intentional, but you can definitely see that. And so it starts out with this little kid. He's probably 12. He's an orphan, and he's being raised as a castle ward, and then he gets assigned to like his job, and he becomes a ranger. And so he's trained by this older man, Halt, and the series just follows him through as he's growing up. He's learning all these skills, and it seems hopeless in the beginning. He doesn't really know what is this job that he's doing, and he doesn't have any friends anymore. And then it's a great story of mentorship and friendships lasting even as you grow older and growing those friendships through the difficulties. It is a really neat series. When I read it, I was probably like 5 years ago. I was a bit younger, and I really enjoyed it, and I read the first couple of books at least a few times. The thing about it is, as my brothers are listening to it right now, I have noticed that there is more language than I had remembered. There is a little bit of light language in it, so that is just a warning that you can look for. I'm not sure how prevalent it is throughout all the books. I knew that there was one bad word in maybe like the 8th book, possibly. But I guess there is some other words sprinkled throughout, so that is something that you can look for. And there's a little bit of like childhood crushes, and they end up getting married later on in the series. But I would recommend this for teenagers. I read it as a teenager a couple of times, and one of my brothers, who is almost 13, he's reading through the series right now and really enjoying it. So this would be really fun for boys, and obviously girls would like it too. One thing I do really like about it is that there's no feminism to it. It's very much strong male leaders, father figures, and the men are working everything out. Not even until the last book a girl becomes a ranger. So that's whenever a girl gets in a position like that. But other than that, the girls are either cook or a diplomat. So that is really neat. I like that it has strong male figures in it. The last book series that I would recommend is the Elsie Duncansmore books, and these were written in 1860. These were written in 1868, so they're really good and have lots of good values in them. They're great Christian books. So basically it's the story of this little girl. Her father has gone abroad, and she's living with her grandfather, her aunts and uncles, and some of her nieces and nephews, I believe. And basically everyone doesn't like her and kind of persecutes her, even actually for being a Christian. They try to get her in trouble, all of her relatives. So in this book, I think her father comes back and she gets to meet him, and he's not really exactly who she thought he was. So she has to rely on God and rely on her faith. There are actually 24 books in this series, and I have only read maybe the first 6, so I only own the first 12 because they were published so long ago. A lot of them are out of print, so do not pick up this copy of them. They've actually cut out a lot of the good values that are in there, and a lot of like the emotional parts have been edited out in that version, so make sure you don't pick up that series. But there are 24. If you really like the Elsie Duncansmore series, you can just keep learning about her as her children grow up. I quit reading about book 6 maybe, where it transfers over to more about her kids and less about her. I feel like it's just not as good as the first couple of books, but I have read books like 1 through 4, I think like 3 or 4 times. I actually read last year, I think, this series, and I just really enjoyed it. And even as a 20-year-old, I feel like I learned things from Elsie and the way that she lived out her Christian life, and there are good women role models in there. You have her father ends up being a really good role model. A lot of people don't like this series because of the relationship that Elsie and her father have with each other. Even after Elsie gets married, they actually still live together. So the lines do get a little bit blurred with submission and whether her husband is in charge or her father is in charge. But I think it still does a good job of the fact that it is a family unit with her and her husband, and then her father is living with them and giving them advice. I don't think there's ever a part when she's married that she just blindly obeys her father. She just respects him and she takes advice from him. But I have friends who don't fully agree with that opinion, so you might just read it for yourself and see what you think. But if you have young daughters, I would highly recommend reading this to them. I have heard of people who were even saved reading this book, or their Christian life was completely changed. So I would definitely recommend this to read out loud, maybe to your daughters. I think they will learn a lot, and they will learn about virtues that used to be commonly taught to children, but in our day and age aren't necessarily. So this could be really good as part of homeschool or just reading out loud to your kids. They would really enjoy it. So I hope you enjoyed this video with some book series that maybe you can read. I feel like sometimes I'm running out of video ideas. I actually was going to do a different one today, but then I changed my mind. So next week you can look out for a really fun video that's not about books, but you'll have to come back and check out what that is. And also, would you like to see any collaborations with special guests? Let me know if that would be interesting to get some book review perspectives from other people. And I hope that you enjoyed these reviews. You can always follow me on Instagram. I will leave the link below. And on Goodreads, as I am currently reading through books, I will update on there. There's some really fun books that I'm reading right now that I can't wait to talk about on this channel so that y'all can enjoy them too. And I hope that you guys have a good week. I'll see you next week. Bye!